Hello and welcome to Steve and Dave's 50 Years Ago this month. In this episode, we're going to be talking about the charts from Billboard Top 100 of August 14th, 1971.
That's right.
Steve, what do we got to start us off with?
Yeah, so in the middle of August in 71, it's the Bee Gees. The Bee Gees are on top of the charts. We talked about the Bee Gees last month, but it's How Can You Mend a Broken Heart? It's really a classic Bee Gees song. It is, I actually think it's one of their greatest songs, maybe one of their best songs. And it is, it's
covered by everybody.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
At number 2 then is Gene Knight's Mr. Big Stuff. A poppy soul number, and actually a very interesting song in that it's a kind of an empowered woman. It's there's a certain kind of swagger to this song that is it's really quite compelling. So Mr. Big Stuff at number 2, and then we have at number 3 we have John Denver with Take Me Home Country Roads. So what do we need to know about this song, Dave?
Well, this is a song that really has a fascinating background. I had no idea. But Denver did not write this song by himself. In fact, he came into the process fairly late. The song was written by a folk duo known as Fat City, made up of Bill Danoff and his girlfriend at the time. They would marry later, Taffy Nibbert. Started off, they were just driving along through Maryland to a family reunion of hers in Maryland, and just driving along a very scenic route, Clopper Road. And he just started, he was strumming the guitar, she was driving, and just started jamming a little bit and coming up with some lyrics about driving along a country road, right? He would go back to their apartment in Georgetown and work on this a little bit. And then the two of them, Fat City, opened for John Denver while he was playing at a little club in Georgetown, Washington, D.C., called the Cellar Door. This was December 1970, during the holiday season. And between Christmas and New Year's, after their last set, they just said, why don't you come over and we'll play some music and just hang out. So he agreed to do that. On the way there, he got in a car accident and broke his thumb.
Wow.
But still, after going to the ER and getting his thumb splint, he went over to their place, and they had already written a song for him called, I guess he'd rather be in Colorado or something like that. I'm not familiar with the song.
Yes, yeah, I do know that one. Yeah, okay.
All right, but it was another song that was going to appear on the album that this appeared on, Poems, Prayers, and Promises. I guess he'd rather be in Colorado. So
yes, that's it. Yeah.
Do you guys have any new material? And they said, well, yeah, we've got something. We're actually writing it, hoping to sell it to Johnny Cash. And I think you'd agree with me. This would be an excellent song for Johnny Cash.
Oh, absolutely. This has Cash written all over it.
Yeah, absolutely. But he said, well, let's hear what you have. So they played it. It was essentially the first verse and the chorus. And he said, that's a hit record. Oh, yeah. Aren't you going to record it yourself? They said, well, at the moment, we don't have a recording contract. Although that duo actually ended up making 4 records of their own.
Okay.
But at the time, they had no recording contract. And he said, well, would you give it to me? I'd love to put it on the album that I'm working on. And I said, okay. I said, well, let's work it. Let's get it out. Let's finish it. And Bill Danoff said he had just this manic energy, and he was buzzing on painkillers, but he wanted to sit down and just bang it out that night. So that's what they did. Got out an encyclopedia. Oh, by the way, none of them had ever been to West Virginia, right? Starting off, the song was Almost Heaven, Massachusetts. That's where Bill Danoff had come from.
Yeah, place he knew.
But the Bee Gees had already had a hit with Massachusetts a few years earlier. So they decided they couldn't go that way. Almost Heaven, Maryland didn't work. So they ended up with Almost Heaven, West Virginia.
Huh. That's interesting.
And Danoff had actually had some West Virginia associations. He was befriended with Chris Sarandon, the actor.
Oh, right.
As well as a group of hippies from a West Virginia commune who used to come and watch them play in some of the little clubs that he used to play at. And that actually comes later in a verse that was deleted in the recording, but I'll get back to that in just a bit. Anyway, so they're looking through the encyclopedia. What do we have on West Virginia? What can we use? Oh, well, there's the Blue Ridge Mountains, the Shenandoah River. They're predominantly in Virginia instead of West Virginia, but
that's right.
They're still there. So he found that very, very poetic. It flowed well.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, Taffy was trying to come up with a way to get rhododendron into the song, because that's the state flower, which she found out in the encyclopedia. So rhododendron. And that was actually the working title of the song.
What was the working title?
Rhododendron.
Of course it was.
Yeah. So it was actually written on their lyric sheet that they sent to the ASCAP.
Yes.
God. All right. So anyway, they work on this. They're getting all these things down and changing words, moving lines around, getting the bridge.
Mm-hmm.
And Danoff said the bridge was actually something that came from his childhood, because laying in bed at night in Springfield, Massachusetts, he would listen to the Saturday Night Jamboree, which was a broadcast from Wheeling, West Virginia.
Yeah.
WWBA. And so the radio reminds me of My Home Far Away was a reference to that.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah.
Anyway, 6 a.m., they're finished with the song. That night, Denver finishes his set, doesn't have anything for an encore. He says, well, Fat City and I just completed the song last night. I haven't even learned the lyrics yet, but we can try it. So Taffy holds the sheet of paper with the lyrics on it, and they read from this while they're singing. Of course, he can't play guitar because his thumb is broke, but
right.
They get it done, right? And just 5 minutes, standing ovation, and they knew they had a hit.
Oh, for sure.
They recorded it in January, just a couple weeks later. I don't know where the Brill Building people actually did their recordings, what studios they used.
Yeah, I don't know.
This was definitely a Brill Building product. Take Me Home, Country Roads. It had Gary Chester on drums, which was essentially the East Coast equivalent of Hal Blaine, right?
Yeah.
You had Eric Weisberg, popular kind of a bluegrass session player.
Yeah, and he played a lot with Denver down the road too. Yeah.
Best known for his solo on dueling banjos.
Dueling banjos, right.
Right. So it had all these all this talent, right?
Right.
Just coming together to make this. Of course, Fat City, with Danoff and Liebert sang background. Danoff was playing guitar. It all worked out, and of course, the rest is history, so to speak.
Yeah.
But I just think it's a fantastic. Oh, interestingly enough, when they released it, it really didn't go anywhere.
Yeah.
Right. Denver had some limited success with Leaving on a Jet Plane, although
Yes.
that's actually more of a Peter, Paul and Mary tune. But
That's right.
He was with the Chad Mitchell trio and had a minor hit with that.
Exactly. Yeah.
But yeah, RCA Records said, well, it's not going anywhere. We're going to stop promoting. They said, please don't. Please stick with it. And they did, and it ended up peaking at number 2 on the Billboard Top 100 chart.
Yeah.
And right after How Do You Mend a Broken Heart, the Bee Gees kind of blocked the top. But yeah, so it was his first huge hit, essentially launched his career.
That's right.
There's one other thing I would just like to talk about real quickly here. And that is the missing verse.
Yeah, this missing verse thing is, I'm intrigued by this. So what happened?
It wasn't radio playable, right? Because
then
I'm gonna try to sing this. In the foothills, hiding from the clouds, pink and purple, West Virginia farmhouse, naked ladies, men who look like Christ, and a dog named Poncho nibbling on the rice, country roads, etc., etc.
No.
Absolutely true. And actually, this is actually a verse that they wrote that they chose not to include.
Well, where to begin? The a couple things. God, they made a wise choice excluding that. Although it really makes,
I think so. Yeah.
It really takes the song in a different direction.
It does. I kind of like it actually, but
I admit I kind of like it too. And then when you couple that with Denver's next big hit, Rocky Mountain High, Friends Around the Campfire, right?
Yes.
A couple things there. Take Me Home, Country Roads, obviously a big song for Denver. Poems, Prayers, and Promises, a pretty big album for him. Both were kind of eclipsed by his next album, Rocky Mountain High, which really just, was stratospheric for him. It seems to me that the Danoffs had a taste of success later on. I believe that they were a part of the Starland Vocal Band. Is that right?
Yes, absolutely right. With the song that he co-wrote, Afternoon Delight. Yes, thanks for reminding me about that.
Yeah.
So yeah, absolutely. And when that band broke up, so did their marriage. 1981.
Yeah.
The band broke up. Shortly later, they got divorced. But
but they had, they had their 15 minutes of fame as well.
Absolutely.
Not only was that a big song, but they actually had, I think, a variety show for a short time.
Yes, they did.
Network television.
Rhoda.
That's it. That's right.
And of course, Country Roads made them fairly wealthy people.
I would think so. It continues. Well, for example, West Virginia has completely embraced the song. If it's not the anthem of West Virginia, it's kind of an unofficial anthem. I know
it's one of 4 official state songs.
There we go.
Yeah.
At the University of West Virginia, when at the end of a game, when they're ahead, the student section will break into song, will break into Country Road. So it's West Virginians have completely embraced this tune, which is so interesting considering that they had to sit down with the encyclopedia or whatever, look at the map, see, this river's here.
Right. Right.
But that's how these things work. And Denver, of course, then would enter. I mean, this is just right at the precipice of him becoming. I mean, he's a very, very powerful player culturally in the 1970s, beyond just music, right? He's big on television. He even has an acting career, right? He's in Oh God, and
Yes.
he's a very dynamic kind of presence in the 1970s, and this is just right at the kind of the beginning of his phase of career.
Yeah, absolutely. And a generous artist too. For instance, they had their contract with the Starlight Vocal Band with his record company.
Yeah,
So
so
he remembered his friends, supported the artists around him. Just seems like an all around sweet dude, right?
Yeah, I think that what you hear about Denver is that he was a pretty decent guy. I mean, I think that's sort of what floated around him. That he was
and absolutely revived
earnest.
the pastoral in pop music.
I think that's absolutely right. We'll talk more about Rocky Mountain High here soon, but I think it's absolutely right. I mean, I think he makes a career out of the pastoral in a way. It's fascinating stuff. Well, thanks for that's. So we have at number 3, Take Me Home Country Roads. It's a fascinating story. At 4, in mid-August, it's Tommy James's Draggin the Line. We talked about that last month. It's a great song. Yeah. Really rocking.
And a great single. The B-side was also fantastic.
Bits and pieces. Yeah, that's exactly right. James Taylor, who is entering his imperial phase, as they say, in the early 70s with You've Got a Friend, whether it's sung by Carole King or James Taylor, it becomes a kind of modern classic.
Sure. And that was just covered by everybody and his brother.
No question. At number 6, we have the Raiders with Indian Reservation, which we've talked about before, but it's a very interesting kind of protest song, kind of powerful in its own way. Very much in keeping with what's happening with the Native American activism in the early 1970s, which will peak in the mid 1970s with the Wounded Knee standoff.
Well, and this is the first protest song in this chart, but there are several, and we'll be talking about a number of them.
It is the case, right, that by the time we get to the early 70s, I mean, the protest movement, protest music has been it's been embraced by the larger public, and that you hear protest songs on jukeboxes and radios, they're played at high school dances and things like that. Maybe even in a way that didn't happen in the 60s. I guess on some level, right, protest music becomes a bit more commercial, or at least more commercially acceptable.
Right.
Yeah. At number 7, then we have Chicago, and it's actually a re-release. Number 7, it's the I guess kind of double A side. It's Beginnings and Color My World, and both were re-releases. The Beginnings comes from the original Chicago LP, the Chicago Transit Authority, and one of the things I think that makes Chicago a very compelling group in the earliest years is that they have a number of writers. You have James Pankow, you have Robert Lamb, you have Terry Kaith. You will eventually, of course, have Peter Cetera. You have a lot of writers, a lot of voices, a lot of kind of different approaches to music, and I think it makes for a very fascinating group. Again, Beginnings was on their first LP. Robert Lamb wrote Beginnings. He was inspired by Richie Havens, actually. And that makes sense because if the song starts off with the furious 12-string by Terry Kaith. If you didn't know better, you think it was Havens himself. And so Beginnings is okay. So you have that. Color My World is a little bit different song in that it comes from the second album, which was released in 1970. Again, these are both re-releases. This is a song from Pankow. James Pankow is the trombonist in the group. And it comes from an extended, so if you listen to the second album, there is a suite of songs, Ballet for a Girl in Buchanan. I think that's a 5-song cycle. And this is extracted from it. And Color My World is, it's mostly instrumental. You have a lot of flute work. You have Walter Parasiter on a flute solo. You have even a kind of discordant end. There's something kind of sophisticated about it. And it's surprising that it was popular in a way, because there's just not a lot of pop elements to it. But these two songs together really, I think it really demonstrates the nature of Chicago at this time. They very much were a kind of experimental band. They're willing to take chances. Eventually, of course,
and what they were doing wasn't something that like anybody else was doing at the time. I mean, it just wasn't a whole lot of that. I'd
agree completely. I'd agree completely. It's just not a lot of that. I mean, they were very unique. Their sound was very unique. Now, I think it's clear that by the time we get to the late 70s and early 80s, when David Foster becomes a songwriter in the group and Peter Cetera becomes kind of the dominant force, that they become much more commercial and I think far, far less interesting. And I think you can argue that their early albums they're quite self-indulgent and, all of that. But there is something there that's very innovative. And I'm not sure that Chicago was ever super cool, but there's something about the early albums, I've talked about this before, that is just, I think, quite remarkable. And so Beginnings and Color My World make for a very compelling double A side entry into the charts at number 7. It's just really, really fascinating stuff in a way. Yeah. So, at number 8, we have a cover at number 8. We actually have, I guess, 2 covers at number 8. It's the artist Tom Clay and his take on the Jackie DeShannon, What the World Needs Now Is Love. And then his take on the Dion DiMucci song, Abraham, Martin, and John. So you want to talk a little bit about Tom Clay and these songs?
Yeah, Tom Clay was a disc jockey working at KGBS in Los Angeles. And he mixed these 2 songs, both of them intended as types of protest songs.
Yeah.
In fact, one of the reasons that Diane Warwick didn't sing What the World Needs Now is because it was a bit too preachy. She thought a little bit
interesting.
Controversial. But in this remix, he takes these 2 songs and keeps going back and forth between them, and interspersed you have excerpts from speeches of John F. Kennedy and Martin Luther King, who are, of course, the Martin and John of the Abraham, Martin, and John song, which, by the way, was a song written in 1968 by Dick Holler, first recorded and made a hit by Dion in 68, 69. But talking about the assassinations, the 60s was an incredible, devastating decade where some of the most hopeful and visionary and all of these people are to the left of the center, right? They're just being knocked off like flies. Malcolm X isn't included in this listing and in this song, but along with Malcolm X, you had Martin Luther King, you had Robert F. Kennedy, you had John F. Kennedy. So it was just people were starting to wonder if any of our hope bearers could survive.
That's absolutely right.
Because all you needed was a lone gunman, right? Just one person who was able to get close enough. And so that's what Abraham, Martin, and John was about. And that's very much what this remix was about as well.
It's easy to lose sight of this because it was a long time ago. but the country, as you're suggesting, was just gutted by these assassinations, just gutted. Just the kind of hope that these were all charismatic figures, right? And the kind of hope and the kind of optimism that they just exuded was just snuffed out so quickly, so randomly, that it took. Well, I think you can argue that the country really never fully recovered from some of these assassinations. It's just it was an extraordinary time, and even though it's 1971, not 1968. I mean, it didn't really make any difference. It was still palpable, right? The loss was just.
Oh yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Had he not been assassinated, Bobby Kennedy could very well have been the president of the United States from 1968 on.
I think that's right.
And
I think that's right.
It was really devastating. And in this remix, you have three Kennedys giving speeches.
Yeah.
One of them was Bobby Kennedy's from Bobby Kennedy's eulogy for Martin Luther King. So it's like never stops. And then Teddy Kennedy giving a eulogy for his brother, and so on and so forth. There's no reason to think that Bobby Kennedy would not have defeated Nixon in '68. There's no reason to think that Bobby Kennedy would not have been, an accomplished president. And had Bobby Kennedy been in office in the late '60s and early '70s, I think the trajectory of the Vietnam War would have been, I think it would have been different. The trajectory of the entire country. I think, it's just the loss is extraordinary. It really is, and it speaks to the fact that the country was just so traumatized by this that a song like this, which is heavy stuff, still can make it into the top 10.
Exactly. I mean, exactly. That's what maybe the most amazing thing of all is that that people still had a kind of appetite for this, that they wouldn't just kind of turn away from it, that it wouldn't seem to people to be too maudlin. Oh, not this again. No, people.
It's very heavy-handed, actually.
Yeah.
Boom.
It's not subtle at all in a way, but I think it speaks to the times for sure. So we have Tom Clay with his mix there of What the World Needs Now is Love, and Abraham Martin and John. At number 9 is another kind of heavy record in a way. At number 9, you have the magnificent Marvin Gaye with really a very dramatic change in career. Marvin Gaye had been a figure in the Motown scene, recording on Motown Tamala for over a decade, hits with Tammy Terrell. He was Mr. Motown. But in the early 1970s, Marvin Gaye, we had a real change of heart. And he starts recording an album which will eventually be entitled What's Going On. And quite famously, What's Going On is, the LP is very political. It explores a number of topics. The environment is explored. Inner city violence is explored. It is by almost any measure a very kind of heavy album. And Berry Gordy, quite famously, who ran Motown and who was also Marvin Gaye's brother-in-law, was dead set against it. Dead against it. And
they had to kind of even trick him. They kind of went behind his back with the single "What's Going On" to get it out there.
No, that's exactly right. And so the lead single from What's Going On is at number 9. It's Mercy, Mercy Me, the Ecology. It's a song about the environment. It's a song about environmental challenges, maybe environmental collapse. Things ain't what they used to be. It was unusual in that we had a Black singer talking about the environment. That was, I think, comparatively unusual in this era. But clearly the environmental movement was really getting traction. We are, in the wake of the first Earth Day. the Keep America Beautiful campaign, all this kind of stuff. People are becoming much more aware of the environment and of the effect of pollution. And here's Marvin Gaye singing about it. And it has got a soulful, pulsating kind of groove. It is, it's an awesome song. But the topic is, I mean, for Marvin Gaye, who was basically a kind of romancer when it comes to his tunes, there you go. I mean, he's laying it on the line about what's happening around them, around the environment. It is quite heavy. You got a couple thoughts about this, Dave? It's very interesting.
It's a very brave move. For Gaye to go in this direction. It would have been so easy for him to just keep putting out soulful love songs.
No question.
And things like that. And he would have been immensely successful. But he was clearly moved. This was coming from a place deep within him. And the album, What's Going On, Smokey Robinson says that's his favorite album of all time, bar none. So it resonates with people too. I mean, people recognize it and they share these concerns. And Berry Gordy, even in retrospect, had to say his opposition was mistaken.
Yeah, a couple things there, right? Berry Gordy was chastened by this experience a little bit, and it broadened Berry Gordy's vision of what a popular record could be. I'm not sure that it really shifted Motown's focus in any kind of meaningful way, but I think it was an important experience for Gordy. For Gaye, I think it marked a kind of transitional moment in his career, and he became, he took on a lot of issues. He was a very troubled individual, but he took on a lot of issues on his music in the 1970s. And I would think without question, his music in the 70s is very interesting. It's the most interesting music of his career. And I think you're right about the album. I know Smokey Robinson loves this album. It is considered one of the great albums of all time. And I think it's almost in everyone's top 100 LPs of all time. And so it's fascinating when an artist matures to the point where he's willing to take on, topics that, and here you have it. I mean, this is Marvin Gaye at his mature best. It's fascinating stuff. It's 1971, and it's an era where the counterculture is alive and well, and you've got a lot of tension in the country, still between long hairs and people who think, short, convention. It is, this plays out in a very interesting way with this next song, because at number 10, you have the 5-man electrical band with their big hit, Signs.
Right. First line from this, the sign says, long-haired freaky people need not apply.
Yep. Right.
So this was a one-hit wonder, right? This Canadian rock group, the 5-man electrical band, formerly the Staccatos. And the song was written by their lead vocalist, Les Emerson.
Okay.
Interestingly, it had already been released in 1970 as a B-side for Hello Melinda Goodbye, which reached number 55 in Canada on the Canadian charts, but really didn't do much. So the song is from their Goodbyes and Butterflies album, and it was re-released then in May 1971. And the sides were flipped. This was the A side, and Hello Melinda Goodbye was the B side.
Okay.
And obviously that made a big difference, because this ended up peaking at number 3 on the US Billboard Hot 100 chart, and ranking at number 24 for the year 1971. Sold more than 2 million copies worldwide, earning it a gold record, of course. But Emerson wrote the song after taking a trip along Route 66. And he just noticed, and I remember this from my youth too, just scores of billboards as he's driving along. And they're blocking wonderful scenery, right?
Sure,
you can't
absolutely
see the landscape, because there's so many billboards. And that's what started that. That's kind of what inspired this to begin with. But it is a reflection on larger issues, right? Who has the power? Who has to say? Who gets to say, this is where you can put up a sign. This is what the sign can say. This is what you're allowed to do. This is what you're not allowed to do, and so on and so forth. So it was a protest song in a broader, taking on broader themes.
Yep.
But this is the fourth protest song of this chart, and we're not out of the top 10 yet.
Yeah, it's a. And I think it's one of those songs. This is their only. This is it really for Five Man Electrical Band. But it's one of those songs that if you want to try to take the temperature of 1971, you listen to this song, right? And you get a sense of the.
Oh, and people love this song, right? This was really, really well received. I remember as an 11-year-old, 10, 11-year-old, thinking, "Oh, this is great." Yeah, I just turned 11, and I was really into the message.
Yeah, it's a song that you could. Yeah, it's a song that you could embrace on some level if you felt like you're somehow being victimized. I mean,
yeah,
for whatever reason, you found yourself in embracing the protagonist of the song pretty quickly. But the country was split. I mean, the country was very split. It's a very divided place, and it wasn't just divided over politics. It was also divided over fashion and culture. Although both culture and fashion, certainly had a political edge to them. And so, again, I mean, it seems odd, maybe, but the hair length was a big damn deal in 19. It
was a big deal, absolutely. Basically, from well, it started in the 50s.
Yeah, it did.
Got ramped up even more with the Beatles, and then your hair was a statement, right? Yeah. As a young man that I know once said, "My hair is my dignity."
Here we go.
That was the idea. This is who I am, and I'm making a statement simply by wearing my hair this way.
That's right.
And it was a statement, and people reacted to it. Either people said, "He's one of us," or "He's one of them."
That's it. That's it. I mean, that's exactly it. It was a sign in a way, and but it was palpable. And it was every region of the country. It was young and old. By a man growing his hair out, having his hair on his collar or over his ears or something like that, maybe growing a mustache or beard. It was kind of a political act in a way. And so fascinating song. And I think a song that was covered then later by, I think Guns N' Roses covers this song some 30 years later.
I know it did have a cover. I think that's also became a hit. I'm not convinced that it was Guns N' Roses, but maybe you're right.
Well, I'm not convinced it's Guns N' Roses either, so maybe people can help us out in the chat. But
listen, you read the comments to this, and there are people 50 years later talking about what a great song it is and what it meant to them.
For sure. So. Yeah, absolutely. People loved it and hang on to it. It's a kind of treasured memory, I think, for lots of people. Let's take a look. Okay, we're going to cherry pick a little bit through the rest of the charts, but I want to take a look at the cover of TV Guide, mid-August 1971. Just real quickly, a TV Guide was a weekly publication, kind of small publication that you could put on the coffee table or next to your chair in the living room, that basically outlined the TV schedule for the next week. It was possible to do this in a small booklet because there were so few television options in comparison to today. But TV Guide was an important publication, and it sold. It might have been one of America's most best-selling magazines, weekly magazines in this era. It was a big deal. And so I just want to take a look at the cover of TV Guide from August of 1971. Take a look at it here. And there's a couple things that stand out. So now, interestingly, Dave, there's no identification on the guy on the cover about the show or the actors being lampooned, but everybody
not necessary.
Well, apparently not, right? Necessary. And so the show was, go ahead, Dave, the show was what?
Bonanza. And,
Of course, yeah.
Bonanza had been on television, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, I think it even started off as a black and white series.
It did. Early 60s, it was black and white on NBC. And then
So it had been around for nearly 10 years already.
Absolutely. Yeah, Bonanza would remain on the air for another couple of years, go off the air in 73. I just want to say something about the image here. This is the main figure here is an actor named Dan Blocker, who would die just a few years later, tragically pass away. And Dan Blocker was Haas on Bonanza, and he was a big fella, big guy. And of course, what you have here is the picture of the horse terrified that it's going to be saddled up by Haas. And there's a little bit of a wee bit of fat shaming going on here. And it's just interesting that in the United States on television in this era, people who were of a different size were rarely on TV. I just want to, the television and television stars were very homogenous, right, in this era. And if somebody sort of broke the mold in any kind of way, it was big news. And Dan Blocker being a heavy guy was actually it was really a point of, he was derided. He got a lot of stick for it. But I do think it's interesting that on the cover here, you don't have the show or the actors' names even identified. It's just everybody knows this is Bonanza and Dan Blocker. Okay, so let's cherry pick a little bit. We are finally going to get to see a cover of the group CCR where John Fogerty doesn't look like he's going to kill his bandmates. At number 15 is CCR's nearly last hit, something called Sweet Hitchhiker. Again, we've talked about CCR and Fogerty at several points along the way here. CCR was always a kind of snake bit band in that they were number 2 so many times on the charts and rarely, okay, never number 1.
Never.
But Sweet Hitchhiker comes from their final LP, Mardi Gras. And you see the 45 sleeve with the band members on the cover, and Fogerty doesn't look like he's going to strangle someone, which is unusual. It's a great song, rockin' song as usual, under 3 minutes as usual. CCR made him quick. This would be about it though for CCR. Would peak at number 6. The band would disband shortly thereafter. This is the last of the CCR albums. Fogerty then the following year would record a solo album, Blue Ridge Rangers, where he would record. He would be on all the instruments and all the vocals. Fogerty, of course, was famously dyspeptic. He was sort of angry at everyone, bandmates, the record label, even his own brother. And it is sort of fascinating to see how all this sort of played out. But you have another great CCR song, Sweet Hitchhiker, really rockin' number. But this is it really for CCR. This is where they fade into the sunset. So if it's mid-August 1971, who do you think is on the cover of Rolling Stone? Just take a guess. What do you think?
Well, conceivably, the recently demised Jim Morrison.
Yeah, you got it.
That's still rather fresh.
No, that's exactly right. So Morrison passes away in early July in Paris under, I think, kind of medium. There's still some debate about this. It's kind of mysterious at the time. I think there was always some debate about whether Morrison actually died, where he was buried, all of this kind of thing. There was always a lot of mystery that surrounded his passing, the autopsy, all this kinds of thing. But Morrison passed away and had been dead for roughly a month, and the rock world was still kind of reeling from it. Dave, how would you characterize Jim Morrison? I mean, what was his place in kind of the rock culture and popular music? How would today? I don't think we have a real sense of it today. But if it's the late '60s, early '70s, where does Morrison fit into the pantheon of rock performers? Do you think?
Well, the Doors got their name from the title of the Aldous Huxley books, Doors of Perception.
Yeah.
And I think it might be fair to say that they actually widened the doors of perception for the pop world and what was possible in rock.
That's fair.
I think they went in some directions that were new. Certainly lyrically, Morrison was ambitious, considered himself a poet,
I did.
and was considered by many to be perhaps the leading rock poet of the time.
I think that's fair. Yeah.
So, yeah, I think that's
Yeah.
the legacy.
I think that's and again, Morrison's death left was a big void in the world of popular music, which makes then the song at number 20, I think, quite interesting. This is the Doors single "Riders on the Storm," and a couple things about this. This comes from their album "L.A. Woman," and there's a number of things about this particular song that I think are interesting. For my money, this is sort of the Doors' masterpiece. I think this is their most effective song for a number of reasons. And one of the reasons, I'll just say this real quickly, is the fact that they have a bassist on this. They brought in a session guy, Jerry Sheff, to play bass. They had actually another session guy to play on some of the bass on some of the other cuts on this LP as well. For my money, the Doors are always missing a bass. Manzarek played the bass line with his left hand, the keyboardist, but their sound was often a little thin for me. But this is a very beautiful record. The sound is full. It's menacing. It's mysterious. I think it's produced well. There's so many things that really make this an outstanding song. This is a very long single by 1970s standards. It's 4.5 minutes long. I mean, it's condensed from the album cut, which is well over 7 minutes. They basically cut out the Manzarek piano solo, but there's something about this that is that's very compelling, very mysterious. There's a lot of conjecture about where it comes from. Writing credits are given to all four Doors, but like with most songs, Morrison took the lead with the vocals. Morrison spent a lot of time hitchhiking in Florida as a young man, and had a lot of very odd experiences. There's also then some people would suggest a kind of allusion to Heidegger in terms of Heidegger's approach to philosophy, this notion of that we're thrown into the world and all of this. I mean, there's always an attempt to read deeply into the lyrics of the Doors, based
Holy
upon.
cow, dude, what was Morrison even familiar with Heidegger?
Well, yeah, apparently that they're yes, yes, it's. But on the other hand, if you parse out the lyrics, I mean, this is sort of classic Morrison too. There's a killer on the road. His brain is squirming like a toad. Okay, come on. There's something slightly sophomoric about all this as well. But as a whole, I think it's a very atmospheric piece. As a whole, I think it is the band is hitting on all cylinders, and even Morrison, who is in a declining state, the vocals here are very strong, really interesting overdubs. This is peak Doors, and unfortunately, this would be really about it for them. The Doors as a trio would record 2 other songs. They would eventually disband in the mid-1970s, and then famously have a number of disputes over the band's name, who was touring, who was, that kind of thing. But this was, I think, a way, if you're going to go out, this is the way to go out. So Riders on the Storm at number 20. I would just add quickly that it only peaked at 14 on the pop charts, but I think by almost any measure, this is a classic. Your thoughts?
Yes.
Yeah, what do you think, Dave? Riders on the Storm, is this a song that resonates with you?
Oh yeah, as you say, it's very effective in conjuring an atmosphere, and I remember watching the Oliver Stone biopic, or
Oh yeah, or whatever you want to call it. Yeah.
yeah, and
Okay.
he kind of suggested that it had something to do with Morrison's experience as a young kid driving by an accident where he
Yes.
saw people lying dead on the road. So I have no idea about that,
Yeah,
but
I know.
yeah, you know, you can make the argument that although drugs and alcohol were clearly taking a toll, um, songs like "L.A. Woman" and "Riders on the Storm" show an artist who is still in very good form.
Absolutely. I agree with you completely. And I also think that this is amongst their best produced LPs and one of their best produced songs. So often the Doors music comes across kind of thin. I just think it oftentimes really poorly produced, but this is magnificent. I mean, from every step of the way. So we have the Doors at number 20 with Riders on the Storm. Those crazy kids from Gary, Indiana, those crazy kids are still at it. And at number 22, you've got the Jackson 5 with, I guess, a favorite of yours, Dave, and that's Maybe Tomorrow. Tell us more about Maybe Tomorrow.
Yeah, well, Maybe Tomorrow was from the album of the same name, and that had Never Can Say Goodbye, which was a bigger hit than this was. But I got Maybe Tomorrow. It was one of the 545s that I had on my little dinky record player. I just played the grooves off of it because it's just so well produced. It has harmonies coming out the butt. Fantastic, really good. It was originally written for Sammy Davis Jr., who, for various reasons, was not able to record it. But this peaked at number 3 on the Hot R&B Singles chart, and at number 20 on the Billboard Hot 100. But that made it the first single released by the Jackson 5 not to reach the top 5 of the pop charts. So we're already looking at a decline in the popularity of the songs that the Jackson 5 are putting out. They, I believe this was the last album that they made as the Jackson 5. And after this, most of the Jacksons left Motown.
Yep.
So they had already seen the peak of their popularity as a music group, but it was an incredible peak.
Oh,
and if they're making songs like this on the way down, wow. That's all I can say. I think Maybe Tomorrow is a masterpiece.
There is something about the harmonies of people who are related, familial harmony. That sound it's you can't duplicate it. You can't fake it, whether it's the Everly Brothers or the Jackson 5 were magnificent singers. I mean, it's obviously you can point to Michael Jackson and his supreme talent, but those young men could sing, and their albums were well produced. And even if you want to think of Maybe Tomorrow as a kind of, I don't want to say throwaway, but it's not one of their major songs. There is something magnificent about it. I mean, there is something about that tight harmony that is just extraordinary. Now, it is the case, right, that they're on their way down. It is the case that Michael Jackson is about ready to board his rocket ship to solo stardom. I mean, we're going to have Ben and a whole host of hits from him coming quite soon. But yeah, an amazing group, an amazing group.
Yeah, and although Michael, of course, on most of their hits had the lead vocals, he was not the only one with vocal tasks on Maybe Tomorrow. Um, I'd have to check again. But I think Jermaine and yeah, I think the
Yeah,
two of them shared the vocals on this.
yeah. I mean, it's we're not breaking new ground here, but the Jackson Five were magnificent, right? They were a magnificent group, and they really had a deep impact on American life in the early 1970s. And even though the hits, maybe stopped coming a little bit, they still were a powerful presence culturally.
Well,
very important.
Michelle Obama makes reference to her seeing the Jackson Five in her book Becoming. This is, I think, for Black youths of the time, the Jackson Five were an incredible symbol of where pop was going and what could be achieved. And they saw, I think a lot of them were really empowered by the success of the Jackson.
I think that's absolutely the case. And in Berry Gordy's vision of what music could do, I mean, to bring people together, the Jackson Five did this as well, right? They were extremely popular with white young people. I remember growing up, you'd see, people with their Jackson Five lunch boxes and Jackson Five notebooks and things like that. And that was no small thing.
They had their own cartoon series.
They had their own cartoon series. Yeah. It was no small thing in this era. So the Jackson Five are remarkable figures culturally, remarkable figures. Let's cherry pick a couple more. At number 30, then, is a British performer. Today is Yusuf Islam, but in his days performing as Cat Stevens, he was spellbinding. He's a really very popular guy. And at number 30, we have Moonshadow, which comes from his LP, his classic LP, Teaser and the Firecat. On Teaser and the Firecat, you have songs like Morning is Broken, you have Peace Train. Many people consider, I think, Teaser and the Firecat, Cat Stevens, greatest LP. Very interesting guy. Born Stephen Dimitri Giorgio. He had some minor hits in the late 1960s. He took Cat Stevens as a stage name, and then he contracted tuberculosis in 1969 and was essentially laid up for actually a little over a year. And during this time, he talks about it as a kind of transformative time in his life, and as it probably would be, right? And he comes out a kind of different person. And so in the early 1970s, he hits the ground running, and he becomes a very, very popular figure. But there's always something sort of pensive, reflective in his songs, almost all of his songs, and Moonshadow is no different, right? I mean, Moonshadow is more a kind of parable or something than a pop song. And of course, famously, he converts to Islam in the late 1970s and then exits the music business entirely for a couple of decades before re-entering in the early 2000s. 2014, he was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. He quite famously talked about how he's the most sort of anti-rock and roller ever to, non-rock and roll personality, whatever, to enter into the hall. But a fascinating guy. And Moonshadow is just one of those songs that I think people have genuine affection for. You got a couple thoughts about Cat Stevens? You got a couple thoughts about Moonshadow, Dave?
Well, this is one of those songs I think that I would enjoy much more if I didn't understand the lyrics. I find it strange.
Yes, it is.
Boy, if I didn't have any legs, I wouldn't have to walk. That sort of thing. It's just all right. It's not a message that resonates with me, but it's a good song. He was a real powerhouse back in the early 70s. And for me, his greatest hits is just still one of those albums that I'll get out on a regular basis and listen to. It's just
that's right.
fantastic. And of course, he did the soundtrack for Harold and Maude.
Yeah.
Did Moonlight Shadow not get on there?
Moonshadow might be on there. I know Moonshadow might be on there. I know If You Want to Sing Out is sort of the big song in Harold and Maude. Harold and Maude, again, the 1971 Hal Ashby song, featuring, I think, Bud Cort and Ruth Gordon. Harold and Maude is an amazing film. It's hard to describe, but it's an amazing film. But yes, he supplied the soundtrack for it.
Yeah.
Real quickly, then.
Yeah.
Two other things real quickly about Cat Stevens. One is that he was on the A&M label. Well, of course he was, right? Because that's the label that artists, real artists were on in the United States. And he describes very fondly his time on A&M, Jerry Moss and Herb Albert's label. The other thing is that I wanted to mention that in 1977, Moonshadow was made into an animated film, which Cat Stevens had a large role in helping to develop. It won a lot of international awards, and we'll put it in the playlist. It was narrated. There was a narrated portion of Moonshadow by Spike Milligan, and Spike Milligan, he was in the Goon Show in the late 50s in England on the BBC, and Spike Milligan famously inspired many British comics, including the members of Monty Python. But the other thing about this Moonshadow animated piece is that it kind of presages MTV. It's a very fascinating little piece of animation, and we'll include it in the playlist. So you have Cat Stevens, Moonshadow at number 30, and then finally, this is a surprising song in a way at number 39 because Bread. We know what Bread is, right? The Bread are these kind of pensive, soft, beautiful. But wait a minute, at 39 is Mother Freedom. What's going on there, Dave?
Yeah, well, Mother Freedom is the one song that makes me kind of sad about, well, it's not one, there are several songs. It makes me kind of sad about what Bread ended up being, because their early success with the ballads, the love ballads, basically damned them to being the love ballad making machine, right?
Yes.
They were incredibly successful with that. They David Gates was fine with just being that, and this shows that they had the ability to go elsewhere with it. So Mother Freedom was a single that was released in the summer of '71, but it appeared on the Baby I'm a Want You album from 1972, which is why a lot of times if you see Mother Freedom released 1972, this is why.
Yeah.
But clearly it cannot be on a top 100 chart before it's released. So right. No, it was released as a single in the summer of '71. It is probably the last Bread hit to feature Roya, who left the group in the summer and was replaced by Larry Knechtel.
Yes, that's
right. And Larry Knechtel was contributed incredibly to Baby I'm a Want You, to the album. But as I said, this was recorded before work on the album actually started. Written by David Gates. In fact, all 11 of the singles released by Bread were written and sung by David Gates, which gives you an idea of where maybe some of the tensions in the band came from.
That is absolutely right.
That led to their breakup in 1973. But here we see David Gates as a rocker.
Yeah.
Very, very convincingly as a rocker. He played the two rhythm guitars on the track. with James Griffin playing the guitar solo, but he sang lead with Griffin singing backup. It entered Billboard's Hot 100 at number 75 for the week ending July 17th, and it peaked really quickly at number 37. So it just barely broke into the top 40. And that was the week ending August 21st. So it just dropped like a rock after that, right?
Right.
As a total, it was only on the Hot 100 chart for 9 weeks. So it didn't even appear on the 1971 year-end Hot 100 list. Although If by Bread did. If, a love ballad. Who'd have thought it?
Oh, this is, right.
Yeah.
That's all they did.
That was from the Mana album that came out earlier in the year.
Yeah. Well, it's, Bread, I mean, and Mother Freedom is the exception that proves the rule with Bread, right? Because this had to be a kind of shock to the system for Bread fans. And I can only imagine what people thought when they, spun that Baby I'ma Want You album, and then they get to the track with Mother Freedom. It's smoking. It's really,
I celebrated. And
it's a really
like
strong song.
I think if they had been given a little bit more freedom or had taken a little bit more freedom as a group, and had maybe been able to assert themselves against David Gates as well. Like I said, this is his song, but if they had actually been able to say, look, man, it doesn't all have to be about bread. We've already made plenty of money. Let's try to expand our horizons a little bit. I think they had every talent necessary to do that, especially once Larry Knechtel joined the group.
Oh, sure.
And it just didn't happen. I think it's kind of sad. I think it's a group that could have lasted and could have done some interesting things.
I know that you're a Bread fan, and so I hear what you're saying there. I think it's an important point about the publishing rights and sowing the seeds of the destruction of this group and so many groups. That the money in music, of course, is in publishing. That's where the money is at. And I was just reading about Queen and how in the early days of Queen, one of the things that Freddie Mercury tried to do with John Deacon was to encourage Deacon, who played bass in the group, to write more songs, to bring more songs to the table. Because in the first couple of albums, I don't think Deacon wrote a single cut. And eventually Deacon did, Someone to Love, Another One Bites the Dust, for example. Those are both John Deacon songs. And then eventually, obviously, he got into the mix. But that publishing piece of it is so important for kind of group harmony. And when you have one person who is the lead writer, and oftentimes sort of the lead singer, all that, the focal point, but also getting all the money, it sows the seeds of destruction. There's no question about it. And a group can't survive, and Bread is a classic example of that. So there we go. So it's mid-August 1971. And I got to tell you, folks, September 1971 is it's awesome. 71 is a classic year for popular music. It is maybe a year that it's unsurpassed. It's possible. And so we're really looking forward to bringing those songs to you in September. So Dave, you got some final thoughts here as we sign off.
Yeah, absolutely. Be sure to check out our accompanying playlist where we have all the songs that we're going to be that we looked at today. You can find that. You can find that here, and you can subscribe if you like this and like to hear some more. You can subscribe to our channel right here. And you can find some of our other 50 years ago this month broadcasts right here.
There we go. And let me encourage you all also to check us out on Twitter, Steve and Dave's One on Twitter. So thanks, everybody, and we'll see you next month.
Bye-bye.